The complete and utter, I don't know what to call it other than organizational incompetence at this point of the Chicago Bulls is baffling to me. I mean, truly baffling. This team is a disaster, and it's not that their record's horrible. They're 18-23. They're not actually a horrible basketball team. There are 10 teams in basketball, or at least I'd say 8 or so, that are definitively worse than the Chicago Bulls. They are not in the bottom echelon of team. The problem is they absolutely should be. The things that this team is doing this season, the decisions they've made so far are just baffling to me. I truly don't even understand what the plan is for the Chicago team, because they have no path to doing anything other than best case scenario, barely squeaking into the playoffs. And I mean, if things go really well in their direction, that is the best case scenario. And then they get absolutely annihilated in round one. Odds are they're not making the playoffs. Good chance they don't even make the play-in. And I just don't get what the plan is for this team. I know I feel like I made this video like a month ago, and I think I did, but I almost feel like I have to reiterate it, because like they get blown out by the Hawks tonight, who's one of the teams they're kind of competing with for those play-in spots. Drops them to 18-23. They lost to the Pelicans earlier this week, which is not a great loss. And the problem is, this would all be understandable if they had a lot of young talent, if they were building something towards the future. Felt like there was a direction for this franchise, but they don't have that. Their best young talent is Kobe White, who's good, not great. He's not a build-around piece, but he's a good player. Josh Giddey has not been what they were hoping he would be, in all honesty. I don't think the Giddey trade is really going to long-term work out for them, especially considering they gave up a guy in Caruso, who again, at the time was one of the most valuable role players in the league, and a type of guy who I think you could have gotten multiple picks for, maybe even a first-round pick and some real assets. Instead, you get a young guy, yes, in Josh Giddey, but a guy who is averaging, and we'll come back to these stats, but for the season, Giddey's 12 points, 32% from three, a bigger role here in Chicago this season, and yes, he's 22, so I guess there's some youth and some promise there, but overall, 43%, 32% from three. It's just simply not good enough, plain and simple. There's no other argument to be made. That Giddey's been great, and outside of that, I mean, Jalen Smith, probably not going to be anything more than a rotation big, even at his peak. Dalen Terry, he was a first-round pick. That has not gone well. Montes Buzelis has shown some flashes. He might be the one guy that you look at young talent-wise and go, okay, there might be a future there. We'll see. Julian Phillips, no, probably not. He's young too, but I don't see it. THT, no. Javon Carter, no. Ayo Dosunmu, useful player, would be more useful on a contender, not a bad team. He's the type of guy, again, you could get multiple picks for. Second round picks, maybe even you include him and another guy, you get a first round pick. Like, they have some assets here, obviously, with Vucevic and Levine as the centerpiece for this team as well. Patrick Williams. There are some real guys here who playoff teams would be like, yeah, we'll give you a second round pick for this guy and 2 seconds for this guy and maybe even a first for these two guys. They could find a way with Patrick Williams, Vucevic, Levine, Ayo Dosunmu, really those 4 guys, I think, of getting real return. And look, people are going to say Levine has no trade value, Vucevic has no trade value. Those 2 guys are having the best seasons of their careers, pretty close to, when you look at their efficiency. I mean, their numbers have been incredible, and I think that raises their trade value, at least to a certain extent, where a playoff team's going to go, yeah, that team can put us at another level, or that player, I think. And I think there are teams that are looking at both Vucevic and Levine and thinking that. How this team has gone 3 years now making no moves when it's been very clear, really pretty much since the day Lonzo got hurt 3 years ago. Oh, and speaking of Lonzo, that's another guy who is a real trade asset who teams would be interested in, by the way. Didn't play tonight, so I didn't think about him, but he's another real trade asset for this team. They have the types of pieces that would be enticing to contenders, and maybe you're not going to get 5 first-round picks for all these guys, but you might get a first and 4 or 5 seconds. Like, I think if you conglomerate players together, maybe you get a couple young talent guys who have some promise. There are teams that could use these players, absolutely. And I feel like the fact that over the last 3 years at this point, they've done nothing to either substantially improve the roster or commit to a rebuild is baffling to me. Look, I get it. You don't always want to tank immediately and just give up when a team doesn't look like they're a real contender. But when it's been proven for years that they are not that, and there seems to be no real path to contention with the core that you have, why would you not cut bait and take advantage of the assets you have, especially when guys like Vucevic and Levine realistically probably have the highest trade value now that they will ever have, because they're playing really well this season. You look at the numbers, Vucevic still not, I mean, he has not shown quite as well as he was earlier in the year. He was 45%, but he's still 43% from 3 on almost 5 attempts a game. That's easily a career high for him. He's averaging 20 a game, 10 rebounds. Not a horrible defensive big either. I mean, he's not great, but he's the type of guy offensively as a connector, as a scorer, as an option. I think a playoff team would love to have Nikola Vucevic come in, even if he's not playing the same role on a playoff team. He's the type of guy who comes in and plays 24 minutes a night, 28 minutes, I don't know, and makes an impact. Like, he's a real impact big. Zach LaVine is averaging 24 a game on 45+% from three. I mean, you can criticize him all you want, and people were talking about before the season, one of the worst contracts in the league, whatever. He was didn't have a ton of trade value last season. I mean, they tried to give him away last year and nobody wanted him. You can't tell me a guy playing like this with this level of efficiency, 56% from 2-point range as well. I mean, he's got more 30-point games this season than I saw the stat. I forget the names, but it's Cade Cunningham, LeBron, Steph, a variety of, it was like 6 guys combined. And Zach LaVine has more 30-point games than all of them. There is a team, Orlando, Houston, I don't know, somebody else who's going to look at Zach LaVine. There's got to be one that's like, he would really help our team. He would give us the scoring punch that we're lacking right now. And I just, again, don't get how they can't figure this out. Lonzo Ball did not start the season great, but is starting to find his groove. He's only shooting 35% from three, but he was a 40% 3-point shooter before he got injured. And I think he'll get back to that. And he's a good defensive point guard as well, has some athletic ability, size, good passer, great assist to turnover ratio, which is over 3-1. Another guy would be a real contributor. Patrick Williams, 3-and-D wing, 36% from three. Not a bad player as well. Another guy who would be an interesting piece for a team. Ayo Dosunmu has not shot the three ball as well this year as he did last year, but it's the same story. 3-and-D wing, 3-and-D guard, has some real ball handling skills as well, averaging 5 assists, only 1.3 turnovers a game this year. He's not an off the ball player in that he can be a real playmaker for your team. He can run an offense on a night to night basis, even if it's just off your bench as a backup point guard. He's a real contributor. And like, they have so many of those guys between Vucevic and LaVine, the more quote unquote star power type players, but then the role players of Dosunmu, Pat Williams, Lonzo Ball. How have they not made a move or two? And how have they not downgraded this roster at this point? Because it is doing them no favors to be the 10 seed in the East right now. I mean, look, the teams, all 9 teams above them, they're just not better than. There's no chance. There's just not better than Cleveland, Boston, New York, Milwaukee, Orlando, Indiana, Detroit, and Atlanta. Maybe you could make an argument for Miami without Jimmy, that there's an argument for Chicago, but I'd still take Miami, honestly. And they're going to trade Jimmy, and they're going to get something back for that at some point as well, which is going to make them definitely better than Chicago. And then a healthy Sixers is obviously better than Chicago as well. Now, they haven't been healthy all season, but all these tanking teams, Brooklyn, Toronto, Charlotte, Washington, Portland, Utah, New Orleans, they have all just run away from you in the standings now. You're so far behind in this potential race to try to get a top tier pick. It's out of the question at this point. So you've wasted another season for what's going to be the 9th pick. You know what I'm saying? And like, at the end of the day, I just don't get it. This front office makes no sense to me. Buzelis has some promise, but he's averaging 5 a game on 34% from three. I mean, he might make a second, third year jump, but as of right now, I don't really see it. Only 41% from 2-point range as well. That's not great. I mean, I get he's very young, but it hasn't been awesome to this point for Buzelis, although I think there is some promise there. But you just look at this roster, you look at the lack of high-level young talent, you look at the lack of real ability to even consider contending, not just to like, they were not even really truly playoff contenders, in all honesty, in my mind. But they could maybe, if miracles happened, squeak into the playoffs. It's possible. Very unlikely, but either way, I just don't see a path to contention for this team. And I don't know why they haven't made moves. I don't understand why they're so insistent on going out there and playing 10 games below 500 type ball every single year. It's been like this for 3 seasons now. Like, what are we doing? There's no point. Make moves. Either commit to a rebuild or try to make moves to get better. And there isn't a path to that. Get the assets you can, move towards the future, make some smart moves, please, Chicago. I just don't get it. They're in NBA purgatory, and that's the worst place to be. I hope y'all did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. I'll be back with more NBA content very, very soon. I appreciate y'all. Peace.